Welcome to Evangelism FAQ, a Grow video series addressing many common fears and misunderstandings about mission. Today's question is, haven't we heard it all before? Many members wonder, we're going to see another evangelistic campaign, for instance, and all the topics are going to be the same. Do I really need to go to this?
Well, I understand where they're coming from, but the Bible actually gives us some really helpful counsel in regard to our participation in these types of church functions. The quintessential passage being Hebrews chapter 10 and verses 24 and 25. Let me read it here. It says, "Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." Now let's think about you notice there's exhort one another, consider one another. So the motive is not for what I'm going to get out, but how can I be a blessing to others?
That's right.
And the way that we can be a blessing is by not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Don't skip out on, don't leave, but actually he says we should stir up love and good works. Now, an analogy I like to use is that of peanut butter. If you go to a supermarket, you go to the peanut butter aisle, there's all these brands, but really, when it comes to peanut butter, there's really only two choices. Now, I'm not talking about brand names, and I'm not talking about crunchy versus creamy. I'm talking about healthy versus, well, all the other ones, right? You could take off all the labels. You could spot that healthy one because it's the only one.
Stir it.
That's right. It separates. It's got that oil on top and the concrete on the bottom. The only way to make that good is to put that knife in and to start stirring it up. And it's hard work at first. But as it goes, it stirs up and it becomes this wonderful, delicious thing. The same is true in our participation in church life and especially evangelistic efforts like studies and meetings, because other people are built up just by us being there, and it's an encouragement to them.
Amen. You know, I think one of the other factors that need to be considered when we're thinking about whether or not we should go to something we've heard before. Sometimes we may not understand those things quite as much as we might think we do. Just because we've heard it before doesn't mean we fully understand it. One of my favorite verses is in Hebrews chapter 5. There's a short passage beginning in verse 12 of chapter 5 that says, "For though by this time you ought to be teachers." So he's talking to these believers saying, you ought to be actually teaching. "You need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of God, and you have come to need milk and not solid food." He goes on later to say, "Solid food belongs to those who are of full age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil." The only way to truly get into a deep understanding of the Word is by reason of use. And sometimes we just learn things passively, and we don't fully know them. And the way we know that is, someone will say, "Oh no, we're going to hear this again, this thing about Daniel chapter 2 or whatever." But then you ask someone to teach it, and they get very nervous because it's a much different thing to teach something to learn something. Ellen White says, when we learn, we should learn with the object in view of imparting what we're learning to others. You learn a lot differently when you think about it that way.
And I always like to think about this other lesson too. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and rightfully so, we shun the idea of once saved, always saved. We need to have a continual growing relationship with Christ.
That's right.
Yet somehow I believe we've subtly come to accept this notion of once learned, always learned. Like I came back to the truth, I came into the truth in 1986 and I haven't left yet. Well, the idea that I learned it that one time and I'm set. That there is still continued growth that we can learn and understand for ourselves. We can minister to others, and by God's grace, we can share what we learn to win more souls for Him. So there's a lot of reasons to continue to participate in these types of functions.
I'm reminded of 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2, where it says, "If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as he ought to know it."
Mercy.
So even if you've heard something before, you, by supporting others and ministering to others, and digging a little deeper and learning with the object in view of sharing with others, can still be blessed by attending and being an integral part of those evangelistic meetings. So we just pray that you will participate with your attendance and that the Lord will bless your labors and grow your church.